So for our panel discussion today, we have four very distinguished members. We have Nitish from Nazara, who has very recent and relevant experience of going public. And then we have Pranav Parekh, Managing Partner, Edelweiss Private Equity and Venture Capital. We have Rajiv Mantri, Managing Director of Navam Capital. And we have Sindhu Kashyap, Associate Editor at Your Story Media. So I now invite Sindhu, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Over to you, Sindhu.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I think you have given a completely interesting view of the IPO landscape and what we can expect next in the coming few. Sorry, I didn't realize the video was off. Coming year or so. So thank you so much for inviting me. And as you said, we have a distinguished bunch of people. We have Nitish, founder and MD Nazara, Pranav, managing partner Edelweiss Private Equity, and Rajiv. So thank you so much. To begin with, I see that it's an interesting year for IPOs, not just in India, but globally. There is a big announcement by Didi as well. And then startups like PharmEasy and all of them are going ahead. So I would start with begin with Nitish and start with asking you, since you've gone through the whole process of, getting into an IPO and doing that whole, treadmill, so to speak. Just wanted to understand, when startups now, a lot of startups and a lot of tech companies are headed towards that direction, what should they keep in mind? What is the process like? What are the key lessons you have had? What have you understood from the journey?
Yeah, sure. I think one is, you need to start operating as a limited company or as a listed company at least a year before you get listed. And for us, we were fortunate that, we had, and I think most startups going now have large PE firms backing them. So they have the basic processes and governance in place. But I think that's very important because otherwise it can be a shock to your system to suddenly, get exposed to that. So I think that's one very important thing when you're thinking toward listing. The second thing I think is your numbers. I've realized, Nazara attempted to also do an IPO, as you know, in 2018. But you really need to have your numbers and strong tailwind behind you. Otherwise, it becomes a very difficult situation to really get across the line. So I think these two things you need to be mindful in terms of what is your momentum of your business, pre-listing, and also you need to be able to see tangible growth post-listing, at least 2-3 years visibility. I think that's a good time to do the listing, because it's important that once you're public and you're bringing in a lot of investors, you are able to deliver and create value for them.
Right. I just want to move to Rajiv and, understand from Rajiv and understand from you, when a company is looking at going IPO, when you're looking at driving towards this IPO boom that we are expecting, a lot of companies are citing, I think next year, 2022, as their IPO year, some have already gone ahead with it. I just want to understand, what are the key performance drivers they need to keep in mind? But Nitish clearly pointed you need to work as a listed company at least a year before you file for an IPO. But I wanted to understand from you, Rajiv.
So just to add to what Nitish said, I would say the point he made on predictability, getting sort of certain stability in your business, being able to sort of point to a clear direction that in after a year this is where the business would go, and after let's say 3 years this is where the business would be. I think projecting that with confidence, sort of being able to execute on that path is quite important for public companies. So obviously once you are a public company, when you start disclosing information, if you don't sort of have that kind of predictability and stability in the business, that can bring sort of volatility in the share price. And then that kind of volatility can even drive away shareholders. So getting that kind of clear line of sight that over a 1 year, 3 year period, this is the kind of growth horizon and this is the execution pathway. I think that's a really critical thing.
Right. No, I just want to ask all three panelists and Pranav specifically, while working with startups today, when they're going towards an IPO path and looking at the next, like someone told me, it's the next stage of the journey now. Have you're done with the unicorn, you're done with profitability and all of that. It's like the next step and stage of journey. But when you're advising and working with startups towards that front, Pranav, what are the key steps do you add in? How do you work with them? How do you prepare the promoters? How does that work?
Yeah. Uh, the first thing is, we keep on calling them startups. By the time they are going to listing, they're no longer startups. I can assure you that if they are startups, they're not going to be able to list. I think these new age companies. See, our experiences, it's actually materially different if you think about it. 9 out of 10 companies, maybe 8 out of 10 companies, maybe 80 to 90%, I would say, new age tech companies will tend to have private equity investors, VC investors in it, just like Nitish said. In a traditional business where you are a promoter-led business, the decision making on when to go IPO, how to scale, what to do is really driven by the promoters. Sometimes what we are seeing is that there might be, especially in majority investor driven entities, especially the new tech companies, the timing of IPO does not necessarily lend itself to the to what the management or the promoter really wants, if you will, because there are certain incentives in play that allow for companies to go IPO, and markets like these will always allow companies to go IPO faster than anybody realize, right? So I think when companies look to list, I think we work with companies whether they are new age or traditional companies day in day out as they look to go IPO. And like Nitishan said and Rajiv said, I think ultimately longevity, ability to manage expectations. When you are when you are a close knit small group of investors, being able to talk very openly and really figure out things that are going on in your company is very different than when you're a listed entity looking at quarterly earnings and have to answer to a large set of people. It's a very different mindset. And I think that is something that we need to make sure that the processes, the systems, the capabilities are built in place, right? The governance structures are built in place, the ability to manage such a publicly listed entity is put in place. And that's what you would typically work on with the company. Typically, by the time you're ready to go public, Sindhu, my sense is that the company already has found its way, right? It's already pretty matured to that sense. I could argue to a certain extent that this kind of market that you're seeing might allow even a little bit of slippage on the maturity curve of the companies that will go IPO, but that's just part and parcel of the environment that we are in. But traditionally, I think you would expect these to be in place. So really, from being thinking about long term to also being able to manage the short term and balancing is something that I think is very critical. But in reality, Rajiv and Nitish talked about, our IPO process unfortunately does not even allow for ability to share appropriate information going forward, right? So how do people know, how do investors know what to expect? It's one of the biggest fallacies that we have of our markets, and it's globally true. That's why globally SPACs have started to, people think that the SPAC process is a much better process because at least you are allowed to share how people are thinking going forward. So I mean, I think maturity of the organization, the board, the governance, the processes become more important beyond just the business and thinking long term.
Right. You brought out a very interesting point in the beginning. You said that, startups are no longer startups and they touch the IPO phase. And that's very true. And I see that even with Nazara, you have a 20-year-old journey. It's not a, smooth 10-year-old ride. And if I remember clearly 6 to 7 years back, a lot of startups were saying, IPO in the next 2 years, IPO in the next 5 years. I mean, it was a conversation that was I think in 2015 and 2016 it was like IPO was every startup's goal, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing. But the point I'm trying to make is it's a little it's not that easy and simple as it looks. So Nitish, from your journey and experience, could you tell me, you know the time it takes, how much of preparation goes behind it, what are the things that companies should consider even before, and what should they be cognizant of while they're doing it? Could you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of the effort and time, right? I think going public within the Indian regulations is a pretty exhaustive process. It's not very superficial, I can say. But for us, since we successfully did the IPO in our second attempt, right? In the first attempt in 2018, we spent a year preparing for it and went through a solid learning curve, I would say. So when we restarted the process in 2020, I would say it was a 6-8 month process, which went a lot more smoother. And we largely went with our partners that were there earlier. So, the entire teams came together and were able to execute it well. I think getting the right partners, whether it's your bankers, whether it's your lawyers, whether it's your auditors, and getting them to work together as a team is the other critical thing. So I think any weak link in any of these, vendors or partners could kind of also put you back. So I think it's very important for you to choose, all these partners, and even the lawyers, etc., have a lot of work to do. The auditors, of course, have a lot of work to do, but it's also, I think, the lawyers dictate everything. So I think all those aspects are very important to cover as you think through the IPO. And lastly, it's a very expensive process. But nevertheless, it is what it is.
On that note, on the note of the expense, in a lot of ways, I guess it's expensive in a lot of ways, right? Considering that you have a lot at stake. Rajiv, I just want to understand sectorally, there are, like, gaming has shown already an IPO with Nazara. There are a few other sectors that are moving that path. So what does it mean? What does it mean in terms of, everyone says it shows maturity, it is coming of age, all of these words are very, and phrases are used and thrown around, but what does it actually mean on ground when a particular company in a particular sector, goes for an IPO?
So I would say, let's try to assess what is different today from, let's say, maybe 10 years or 15 years ago. So to me, the biggest difference is, the availability of information. So because of widespread internet use, because of all kinds of digital media properties coming up, what is happening is even companies in novel sectors, sectors which could have been traditionally considered, how will this company go public, or how will people assess this opportunity? Today, people are able to, dig up information from across the world, sitting on their computers. They are able to share information, their findings, on different investor forums, on different, social media platforms. So the information aspect has really changed the game when it comes to sort of creating an appetite for, let's say, new sectors, or sectors which are not listed before. And there's always this chicken and egg problem, right? So until a company in the gaming sector lists, no one knows how to assess a gaming company. And that's why pioneering companies like Nazara, they are creating the path for others, and the available of information utilities, where, we can study business models from the US, from China, from other places, and try to discern whether this business can work or not. So both these factors together, I think, are creating an appetite even among sort of the slightly more sophisticated retail investor base.
Pranav, just adding to that, what does it mean broader, on a broader term, not just for that particular sector? I'm sure, like, it automatically means, like, gaming startups, everyone starts looking closely at the other gaming companies and organizations. But when you look at a broader sector and ecosystem perspective, what is that impact of that IPO, of that one single IPO that can bring in?
So I would say both entrepreneur and investor receptivity goes up, right? So I mean, an IPO is also a big sort of, tends to be a media event. The listed company sort of attracts attention and so on. So then people start looking at the space in a new light. And I think the other really important factor is that the existence or the performance of companies that is, verifiable, widely available, that brings in more people, and then you have a virtuous cycle, right? So those who have succeeded with one kind of gaming company, they may invest in 3 others. And that creates generally a virtuous cycle in the ecosystem where the category can broaden, where those who succeeded with, let's say, a new category, they can dip their toe into another emerging category. And that to me is actually the really powerful impact of having a vibrant IPO ecosystem, where the capital really starts going back and forth, where late stage exits give more access, more availability of early stage capital, which then seed new businesses, which then grow up over a period of time. And then there are more exits and so on and so forth. The flywheel really starts turning very fast.
Yeah, yeah. Pranav, I just want to understand this from a, venture capital and an equity perspective from, a company like Edelweiss. How do you view it then? How do you start viewing the companies? How do you start viewing the ecosystem? Do you look at everything differently?
Yeah, so Sindhu, I'm gonna take a little bit big picture approach here to answer your question. What you're seeing, if you think about it, let's step back and you go back 18 months, okay? You will not see the level of participation, interest, activity that you're seeing today in terms of technology companies, in terms of the IPO buzz and everything else, right? COVID has been a structural shift in people's thinking. I think added to the COVID impact, the liquidity that is driving the markets today has a significant impact on how people look at technology as a whole, right? To a certain extent, I would say this is not abnormal. I think you've seen these kind of structural shifts are not uncommon, and when tide turns, everything gets justified one way or another. I think the way I would look at these shift that right now in two ways, long term and the short term impact. I think the long term to me is a structurally great for entrepreneurship in this country, right? Because entrepreneurs ability to take risk is now widely accepted. Businesses on their path to profitability will be started to, people will start to think about them. I was talking to a few mutual fund managers recently, right? And as these companies are going IPO, one of the conversations was, यार पहले दो तीन जो आ रहे हैं देखते हैं, we'll try to figure out how to start looking at businesses that don't earn money, right? Let us think about it. So I think broad acceptance that, look, it's okay, you don't need to have a standard template in which you value these companies, will start to sink in. Things will become, I think, normal for us to see these kind of companies being valued and market coming together to value these companies. I was talking to a few friends in the PVC industry, and I said, this 12 months will materially shift how people think about what they thought their exit ability was, right? I think people thought 5-7 saal tak, we will not be able to exit. Now people might be able to exit in 3 to 4 years in these companies. It's great for entrepreneurship, right? It's a great competition for PE funds. This institutionalization to retailization of these assets is going to be great for this country. I think more activity will be accepted. I think the funding will improve for these companies as we go along, and these are all very healthy things. In the short term, right? In the short term, what I'm seeing is, look, there is no difference between, I think, the current markets, the current market environment, and this just rush, like every other structural shift that happens in these kind of, I would call it a little, I would not call it frothy, but it's, it's kind of getting there kind of environment. I think there's no differentiation between good quality and great quality and the long term and the short term, right? And like I said, the IPO process by itself makes it very difficult for somebody to take a real long-term view or take even a short-term view on exactly how the performance is going to be. So I think I think you're going to see a lot of activity in the short term. It will not, people will start to absorb this, and this will become the new normal, where companies that are not fitting in the profitability side of the business will also be accepted. I think you will get some normalization of what will ultimately people will start liking and not liking, and public markets are notorious. They'll go ahead and do something, and then over a period of next 6, 12, 24 months, I can tell you the shifting will happen. Boys from the men will get resolved. And that's just a natural selection process that will play out.
Right. I was just going to touch on that. I was reading somewhere, Pranav, that globally, the 2021 first quarter of 2021 globally itself, it's can draw parallels to the dot-com boom of the tech IPOs of the dot-com boom. So I just wanted to understand globally what implications does it have? Because if this is like a boom or something like that, and if it busts, what does it mean? And also, I want to get on to the positives, as you know, with India showing so much of perspective, what does it mean on a global scale for the ecosystem as such?
So, I'll give you my perspective on it. I think, we are, as India, right? I think the retail investor base, I'm talking about the public market base, right? I mean, think about it. Even today, we are what, 5% of this population is actually investing in the public markets, right? And now you have, these kind of technology oriented companies also coming into the public market. So we are still evolving, let me put it this way. Now, if you compare us to a global market, a US market is exceptionally evolved, right? I mean, the sophistication of the investor base, the quality of investor base, the depth of that investor base is significantly different. Like I said, I think these are great steps for us. I think, even regulators love that companies go, SEBI is all about going public, right? So I think these are great steps towards democratization, as everybody talks about. And I think you're going to see this when these things happen. I would not call it a boom and a bust. I would not call it, it's a natural process. I remember those, 99, 2000 days that, we were investing. Look, things may get overinflated, hyped up, over expectations will get built up. All of that stuff will happen, right? But the underlying is real. Let's not forget, the technology orientation of companies, the change in consumer behavior, the change in technology adoption, whether it's an SME or a large company or an individual, is changing, right? I think this shifting from good to bad will happen over a period of time. Some things will really, if you recall the Amazon in 99, 2000, a lot of people wrote it off, right? I mean, some of those things have turned out to be real. So even here, I think you're going to have the goods and the bads. I wouldn't call it a boom and a bust. I think it's a process that we'll just go through. It's a natural process.
Right. Nitish, from your understanding, when you got into the IPO game and, the whole treadmill and run towards an IPO, gaming as a sector was considered one of the most riskiest sectors. Okay, it was considered one of the most riskiest sectors. And then you did this whole IPO and it suddenly uh, pushed up. But I wanted to understand from your perspective, where did you get your learnings from? Where did you do your studies from? Because in your sector specifically, there was nothing that stood out as such. Or did something globally stand out that you took inspiration from, or you took your lessons from? How did that work for you?
No, I mean, from the IPO perspective, honestly, it was not us who had to do the learnings, but the analysts, right? Because gaming was a new business for them. We already knew what we were doing. But all credit to them, I think, whether it's domestic investors, analysts, funds, or international, everyone gave us a lot of time, a lot of interest, a lot of positive, approach to actually dig down and understand the model. So we were welcomed in that sense. I would say, being a new industry, and like you said, gaming was kind of on the fence. We didn't have a pushback, or we didn't have a resistance. There was a lot of enthusiasm in wanting to learn and spend a lot of time in understanding what we were doing. Our model specifically, because it's a bit more diversified, so what did not come across as a very risky model, which also was, kind of appreciated. So that was from launching the IPO perspective. From going IPO, I think it was all about getting your hands dirty, right? Rolling up your sleeves and jumping into it and understanding it. I don't think you can learn how to do an IPO in theory. You really just have to jump into it and get it done, and that's a fantastic learning uh, in its own.
Right. But, I just want to understand when you were looking at this and, were looking at everything, you chose a domestic listing, but there were options even for a global listing. I remember from our previous conversation. Can you tell us what made you choose on domestic?
Well, these days popular slogan is Atmanirbhar India, so I guess that's why. But I think on serious note, we felt that we've operated in India for 20 years. We felt that the Indian markets, given the macro factors that have really scaled up for digital businesses, which is your low cost data, smartphone penetration, fantastic digital payments infrastructure. We really felt that the investors are coming of age to understand these new businesses. And while we may have been one of the early ones to get in this year, as you can see, there's a big, queue over there for many more to come in. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. Investors are, I'm very surprised by retail investors. We get emails these days from retail investors who may be holding 10 shares or 50 shares, but they're doing a lot of interesting analysis and sending us a lot of interesting, deep questions, I would say. So it's not just the analysts doing their job, but the retail investors also seem to be doing their job, and it's exciting. So my point is, I think the markets are maturing. I think the India market over next decade is going to be very exciting, and we are happy to play here.
Right. But when you look at the regulations and all of that, did you find it a challenge? Or was it, did you ever think that maybe a global listing will be easier?
No, I think we did not find that big a challenge. There were certain, I mean, there are a lot of things that go into a lot of detail, but I think that's all for the good. I mean, it makes us more diligent. It may be a little extra, and maybe, I'm trying to be politically right, but but it wasn't so bad. I think it was a fairly good process, and I think people can do an IPO in India.
Right. That is your take, but I would like to take even Rajiv and Pranav's take on this. When you're looking at, and a company is looking at an IPO, what advice do you give them, and on what basis do you give them that advice, whether to take an Indian domestic, look at a domestic market or a global listing? Maybe you that first.
Sure. So, Sindhu, I would say one of the driving factors on that would be about your shareholder base. So, if you're an Indian company trying to list abroad, there are a whole bunch of other challenges not related to your business actually. So you would have to be FEMA compliant. You would have to comply with some other regulations, and if you take that path, that presents its own kind of challenges, especially if you are largely Indian investor backed, or if the equity is owned largely by onshore Indian resident shareholders. So I think that is probably one of the driving decisions, because unlike, let's say, the US or some other Western country, India has capital controls, and Indian businesses have to somewhere comply with that, obviously. So I would say that is probably a driving factor when companies try to choose whether to list in India or sort of try to go public abroad.
So Sindhu, my view here is, I think you're gonna find companies which have the primary base of their business in India and India related, India related, should continue and will continue to list here, because the acceptance, the business model, everything is India reliant. I think where you will find is, if these are global companies or global products, or for example, SaaS companies which are selling globally, and then on overlay that with the shareholder base. For example, if the shareholder base of the venture capital firms or PE firms is primarily overseas, for example, foreign capital, right? Then you might in that scenario, find some acceptance of saying, look, let's just go list outside, because the nuances of India don't matter that much, right? Because it's a global business, people understand global business pretty well. There's a very deep and very vibrant market already overseas. The investors are probably also more comfortable overseas. So in that context, I can still see it. But otherwise, I think if it's an India-oriented business, India-related business, I think they should and will probably end up listing more and more here. I think especially with acceptance of these, I think if we sit here, we're on 30th June 2021. I think if you were 2 years out after this in 2023, I can tell you these questions wouldn't be there, because this would have gone mainstream by then. So I think that's just the process we will go through.
Yeah, true. Nitish, back to you. Just wanted to understand how different now that post IPO journey after a company goes public. What are the similarities and what is different now?
Yeah, we've forgotten the last 20 years completely. It feels like we've just started off. It's a completely new beginning. Whatever we did in the past is not relevant. It's all about the future, what we need to do. I think what is also important for companies, I would say, and what I have been telling my team also, is that while we appreciate investors, analysts, sentiment, quarter to quarter number delivery, etc., I think it's very important for us to stay completely true to our objectives and our goals, which we believe is right from a slightly longer term perspective. Because sacrificing those for short term goals, now because I'm in it, I can understand the pulls and the pressures that may be for it, right? Showing, for example, higher margins uh, quarter on quarter or year on year, but they may sacrifice growth, for example. So I think being clear about how you are approaching it and communicating it clearly outwards is important rather than getting pressurized. So, for example, since going IPO, we've been putting out we put out a business update, and we were very clear about it that we are going to drive profitable growth, but we are going to prioritize growth over margins. We're not going to optimize the margins. So in a new business like ours, we have to outreach and also communicate effectively so that we don't ourselves get sandwiched under that pressure that will come from variety of things and sacrifice the longer term strategy. So I think that's very important. I think going after going public for startups, or not startups, but for new age companies which are still not understood very well.
But as a promoter right now, there's a lot more at stake. As soon as you go public, there's just simply a lot more at stake. There are many more variables. So what are the shifts in your daily activities now? You just said it's more long term and forward looking, but what about the day to day? How does that change?
We had a few thousand investors for the last 2-3 years before we went public also. So we've worked as a listed company for the last 3 years or so. It's not really changed a lot for us. But like I said, actually, it's not changed a lot. I mean, we are still doing this, doing our business. Maybe we have to deliver quarterly results, etc., publicly. There are a lot more investor meetings that happen. My CEO and my CFO are doing maybe dozens of investor meetings on a monthly basis, which normally would not happen. I mean, we're not raising investments, etc., but just meeting all sorts of investors and talking to them about. So I think there's a lot of outreach and inbound interest in terms of what are we doing and all. So I think to that extent, more energy is being put in there, but otherwise it's business as usual.
Right, right. Pranav, wanted to get from your perspective of, when companies are looking or maybe approach you or think of giving that idea, how much time do you think they should take before they even get the thought of it? I want to ask both Rajiv and you this, but Pranav, if you could tell how much time they should think, what should they look at in terms of their, numbers and revenue details? What should they keep in mind? What are the basic hygiene factors?
Yeah, I think our own experience in kind of straddling the public and the private markets has shown a few characteristics of a public company that you should have for a successful listed experience, if you will, and they are as follows. I think, like Nitish said, I think there's a drastic shift, and I think Nitish was probably one of the luckier ones to have a lot of retail investor base where he had that experience of dealing with it. In a lot of these companies where there's a very small shareholder base, and where that shareholder base really is focused on fairly long term, I think this pressure of short term and being able to either communicate or really tell the story really well is a very important element of maturity, right? So I think bringing that maturity to the management, to the owners mindset is very critical for us, right? To say, look, what you should expect, how you should think about it, how you don't want to get into this pressure, if you will. I think creating that ecosystem around you, or the support system around you, to be able to manage this as a listed entity is pretty critical. I think thirdly, I would say your ability to kind of look at consistent growth. In my opinion, what we've seen is, consistent growth and not necessarily hyper growth is what is really valued well by investors, right? And I think consistently talking about it and kind of managing that expectation and just delivering on it is what I think would be the right thing. And therefore, I think Nitish mentioned this tailwind aspect of it, right? So you want to be ready when there is tailwind behind you, when you are ready for a sustained period of growth or a sustained period of appropriate operating performance is when you should really go public. So I don't necessarily, in my personal view, I don't necessarily believe that the unicorn status gives anybody the right to go public. I think it's absolutely a fallacy. It's absolutely, doesn't make any sense. You could have a zero revenue company getting valued at 3 billion. Can they go IPO? The hell no, right? And therefore, I don't think the unicorn has any context to it. It's really your operating business, your processes, your systems, your maturity, the business maturity is far, far higher in terms of your ability to go IPO than the valuation in itself.
Right, right. That's actually a very good point, because it's also the year when a lot of unicorns are being born, right? There are so many unicorns this year. So everyone is looking at the next step, and it's a very, very valid point you've put out there, Pranav. So thank you. Thank you so much. Rajiv, to you, I wanted to understand, what are your thoughts? What should the companies keep in mind? Whether, a lot of companies have this doubt today, I'm not a unicorn. I don't have that much of investments or valuations. My valuations are not that high. Can I go list? Can they still go public? How does that work? Could you just basically the basics, touch on the basics there?
No, so just by the way, agree completely with Pranav, and just to pick up on a couple of things Nitish had said. So one was, Nitish mentioned the cost of going public. That is a real cost in terms of both. I think not even more than financial sort of this thing. I think just sheer bandwidth that internally one has to devote to sort of going through the process, meeting the regulators' requirements, then sort of communicating your sort of business and what the company is trying to do to all these new investors, retail investors, getting the story out. So that can be a pretty exhausting process, right? So one has to be prepared for that as a company, and frankly, that's very different from sort of sharing information privately with 3 or 4 large funds and raising a chunk of capital. While that process is also intensive, the regulatory bar and the kind of decision makers bar over there is probably a little lower, I would say. So I think being internally organized and structured for both the process prior to listing as well as even after listing, when like Nitish mentioned how his team is now dealing with so much inbound interest, and senior management then has to sort of field that interest, address those queries. All of this obviously can also take away from management time towards actually building the business, right? So there's a fine balance there, and one has to make sure that you're prepared for the kind of completely different context of being a public company.
Right. Now I'll just touch upon regulations. We did speak about that, and we did say that it has evolved and transformed significantly. But all three of you just want to understand, with if there are some more supportive SEBI regulators and better, a little more friendlier regulations, what would be the impact of that towards IPO journey? Maybe Rajiv, you could get on that, and then we can, Pranav can touch on this, and then Nitish.
Sure. So my view on that is that in here sitting in 2021, we are looking at a very different sort of Indian investor sort of base, a very different information sort of availability context compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago. Nitish had just mentioned that even small shareholders are sort of emailing the company, asking questions, asking intelligent questions. So that just tells us that retail investors are not that much in need of protection as they may have required earlier. So we've seen this play out with bigger companies as well, where sometimes certain egregious kind of corporate governance actions are actually flagged by some obscure blogger or posted by someone on social media or something like that, and then that kind of gets attention. So I think because of those changes, I think there is a case for making IPO regulations less onerous. There should obviously always be the sort of level of protection offered to small investors, retail investors, but again, I don't think we should infantilize investors too much. Often they are much smarter than we presume them to be.
Yeah, so yeah, Shintu, we as a firm, I mean, we discuss and we interact with SEBI on a fairly consistent basis, as you can imagine, various parts of our system, whether it's our IPO banking team or our AIF team or on the IPO side. Our view based on what we've seen is SEBI's been very supportive of this transparency push, right? I think they are really pushing for transparency. They are really pushing for more and more companies to go public. And I think if you even see it from, one step above, you go to the level of the PM, and you've seen this government also putting a lot of emphasis on more and creating a, better ability for, even early stage companies to go IPO, right? And the general consensus, I think the view is, I think the more eyes are on you, the better off the governance becomes, right? Versus a very closed system. I do believe that SEBI will continue to be focusing on retail interest with a hawk eye. I think India, whether you take an RBI or a SEBI, I don't think you can expect any relaxation from that perspective, right? When it comes to retail, they will be extremely cautious, and I think that's not a bad thing. I think they keep on improving the mechanism, regulatory mechanism, the oversight mechanism for these companies, and I think that's a great thing. But I think allowing companies to go public, providing more and more accessibility for companies to go public, encouraging companies to go public, making sure all the regulations and everything allow more and more of this to happen, I think is something that we believe SEBI is very interested in. And by the way, we're talking about all of this now as if something has changed in the SEBI regulations that allow all these tech companies to go IPO, right? Nothing has changed. It's always been available, right? It's just that now we're all woken up and said, oh, ye bhi ho sakta hai. But nothing has really changed.
Nitish, what is your take on this? What can be better regulations, or do you feel it's all perfect?
No, I don't think. I mean, nothing is ever always perfect. But what I was surprised to see was that with SEBI in the whole process, they moved very fast. I mean, our approvals came in within 45, 50 days, even for a new business, and there were a lot of questions that were understood. So there was a lot of reactive responses that came in that allowed us to move fast. So I think while SEBI is looking at protecting retail investors, which obviously is paramount, I think they are also, at least from my experience, very keen to move forward with these new companies listing and enabling them to list is the sense I got, which is great. I think they're driving the right balance. It's still early days, so I'll still figure out what are more regulations once we trip some of them. Hopefully not, but we'll try not to. Yeah, it's early days for us. So I don't want to sound too informed about what I am not.
Great. Okay, my last question to all three of you. Quick. Top one trend or two trends that you see in 2021 with respect to tech IPOs. What are the next steps? Nitish, you can go ahead as you finish the last in the same way.
I think huge retail investor interest is going to be there in all these tech IPOs.
Okay. Rajiv, Pranav?
Yeah, my view is, I think I agree with him. Massive interest of retail and HNI in these IPOs. I think everybody's going to start realizing, my God, this size of value creation is happening. Yeah, and I think acceptance of and maturity of this space.
Great. Rajiv, last thoughts.
No, I echo that. I think we're going to see some very successful IPOs, and the scale of the demand for such new age companies is really going to shock a lot of people.
Great. Thank you so much. It was great talking to all of you. Each one of you have been extremely kind and in helping us all know about the journey. And thank you so much. Thank you. Abhishek, over to you.